know about you, but all those Alleluias we were singing this morning made me a little wistful, because this is the last Sunday we will get to say or sing that word until Easter morning. So, when you hear it through the rest of the service, just say goodbye. I was telling folks before the service, there are some Lutheran churches who even write the word Alleluia on a piece of cloth or a scroll, put it in a box, and go outside and bury it after worship on this Sunday. And they don't dig it up until Holy Saturday, the day before Easter, to mark the fact that we are saying goodbye to Alleluia. And so this is Transfiguration Sunday. That's the Sunday that is the last Sunday before Lent begins. And that's when we say goodbye to Alleluia. It means we're halfway between Christmas and Easter. And it's the day when we always tell that strange story I just read about Jesus on a mountaintop with his closest friends. And while he's up there, his appearance is apparently miraculously transformed or transfigured into this dazzling, radiant glow. And he talks with Elijah and Moses, who suddenly appear out of the cloud. And then as that cloud swirls down from heaven, God's voice is heard saying that Jesus is his son, he's beloved, and that they should listen to him. You might have noticed that Mark read to us another mountaintop story from the Bible. This one from the Hebrew Scriptures, comes from Exodus, and it tells the story of Moses, who ascended up Mount Sinai where he saw God in a fiery cloud, received the 10 Commandments on those stone tablets, and then returned back down the mountain with his face mysteriously transformed or transfigured, shining radiantly, and his hair had turned snowy white. I think another name for this Sunday could be Mountaintop Sunday, with all this talk of climbing to the top of mountains to encounter God. It's all about the mountaintop experience. Now, we've heard that phrase, not even in church, but just in general, the mountaintop experience. It's shorthand for those moments we each have in life that rise above, that are sublime, spectacular, maybe inspiring. In those kinds of moments, we experience great emotional release, maybe some profound insight, or deep spiritual renewal. And when people try to talk about those moments they've had in their own lives, words can't really convey or contain that full power or meaning of what it was. We just know we never forget them after they've happened to us. Now, most often, not always, but most often, these mountaintop experiences happen when we take time apart, when we step away from the fray of everyday life. We get out of our routine and we stop and we look and we listen to what God has to say. And it's extremely common, and I think no coincidence that both of our stories today, too, say that it happens often when we are out in nature. Standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon, something I've never done, but I've heard people talk about. Canoeing silently across a wilderness pond at sunrise. That's something I've done. Staring up at a starry sky on a summer night. We are deeply affected by this kind of experience. We're transformed by it. We too, you could say, are transfigured. And when it happens, it's so wonderful that we wish we could stay there forever. That was certainly true for Peter and James and John in the story we heard from the gospel. They get up to that mountaintop with Jesus, and Peter, who's always the first one to put his sandal in his mouth, blurts out, "It's really good to be here. Let's just set up shop and we'll stay here forever." As usual, Peter is speaking for all of us, flawed and flailing followers of Jesus, because like him, I think we've all wished we could stay up on the mountaintop, basking in the glory, staying separated from the yuck and the mess of everyday life in the world below, maybe surrounded by a gleaming cloud, feeling like we're having some message from God directly to us, feeling that supernatural thrill. Haven't you wished when you've been in the middle of an experience that maybe caused your jaw to drop in wonder, that you found yourself wishing, can't I just stay here, right in this moment, forever? Well, God interrupts Peter. The gospel says Peter hadn't even gotten all the words out of his mouth before God's voice comes thundering out of a cloud. This is my beloved son. Listen to him. That will stop you in your tracks. And it stopped Peter and James and John. They all fell on the ground in fear. What God was doing was not so subtly, maybe, making the point to Peter, and I think through Peter to us, that if we were to try to stay up in the stratosphere of a mountaintop, we would miss the whole point of the experience. We would fail to understand why God brought us up there in the first place. Because what God was really saying is what goes up must come down. Theologian Henry Drummond explains it this way: God does not make the mountaintop for us to live on them. We only ascend to the heights to catch a broader vision of the earthly surroundings below. We don't live there. Streams begin in the mountains, he wrote, but they descend quickly to gladden the valleys below. This truth is easy to miss, I think, when we listen to the lessons that were assigned for this morning, because they stop before the story ends. I don't know why, and we've talked about this before, whatever committee picked the lessons they picked for the Sundays, they cut it off before the story ends. So they let us only hear today about the mystery, the glory, the special effects that are found in Act 1 that take place up there on the mountaintop. But we didn't get to hear the critically important Act 2, where each of those scenes changes dramatically. In the story from Exodus, we're told Moses comes back down off the mountain and finds his people worshiping a golden calf, flailing around in a chaotic sea of debauchery. When I read that Act 2 of the story, all I can think of is Moses is like the parent who comes home early from a great vacation, only to find his teenagers throwing a kegger at the house while they've been away. And he responded like most of us would if that happened to us. Now, in the gospel story, Jesus leads Peter, James, and John down the mountain with him to meet people who need them the most. As soon as they're making their descent, we're told, parents rush up to him with their son, who's suffering from violent epileptic seizures, and they say, "Lord, heal our son." And as once Jesus has done that, he did heal the boy, he and his disciples set off for Jerusalem, where they will face brutality and persecution, suffering and betrayal, and abandonment. And for Jesus, he will face that horrible death on a cross. So we've gone from that incredible, supernatural, wonderful high, literally as well as figuratively, of a mountaintop experience, and in 1 second, we're back down in the low of the world at its worst. It's like somebody let the air out of the balloon at a party, or you could hear a soundtrack of that fail sound, wah, wah, wah. It's kind of how those stories feel like they end, except I think the ending is the most important point to the whole story. Because God doesn't take us up on a mountaintop so that we can live up there and forget all about the world in need that's still down below. God takes us there so that we can be inspired, we can be reassured, and we can be transformed, and thereby equipped to head right back down that mountain into the messy, hurting, frightened world that waits down at the bottom. They're down there, and they're waiting for good news from God that we're supposed to deliver. Moses didn't stay on the mountaintop, Jesus and his disciples didn't stay on the mountaintop, and neither should we. People are transformed or transfigured by their mountaintop encounters with God, in part because they give us perspective. They remind us who God is, the Creator, and who we are, the created. I imagine that that's what Sir Edmund Hillary must have felt. He's the man who was the first, he along with Tenzing Norgay, were the first human beings to summit Mount Everest. It's the tallest mountain in the world. Can't imagine how small he must have felt up at the top of the earth. One of his closest friends described it this way: Something touched him up on that mountain, something very profound for him. I think rather than making him feel like king of the hill when he got up there, I think it made him feel small. And that's what being on any kind of mountaintop, whether it's a figurative one or a literal one, does for us. It allows us to see the big picture and our place in it. Another thing a mountaintop experience does is give us reassurance. We, like Moses on Sinai, get to see what's up ahead. And from that point on, even though we do go back down on earth where we can't see so far ahead, we know we're headed in the right direction because God has reassured us that we are. We've gotten an idea of what the destination looks like, and we are assured that no matter what happens, we'll be safe with God. Remember what Jesus said when they fell down in fear at God's voice, don't be afraid. They must have clung to the memory, I think, of that time on the mountaintop when they were running in terror through the valley of the shadow of death as Jesus was dying on a cross. This sense of reassurance, no matter what we face, we heard last month in the words of Reverend Martin Luther King. On the night before he was assassinated, remember, he said, "God has let me go up to the mountaintop, and I've looked over and I've seen the promised land, and I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the Lord." There's one other thing among many that we get from a mountaintop experience, and I think that's inspiration and a sense of purpose about what we're supposed to do once we get back down to earth. That encounter with God empowers us to respond to the world in need because God calls us to follow Jesus in service to others. This is my beloved Son, listen to him. Jesus came down from the mountain, and what did he do? The very first thing he did was heal an epileptic boy waiting for him at the bottom. And then he turned his face to Jerusalem, and he took the first steps on the path that was going to lead to Golgotha. This moment in the gospel is where it hinges and pivots, and from here on out, we're heading to Jerusalem. Jesus knew what he was called to do in service to the poor and the outcast and the sinner, and indeed to the whole world. Moses descended from Mount Sinai and delivered the Torah, God's law, to a people who clearly were in desperate need of God's guidance. And then, after liberating them from that oppression, he led them on through 40 years in the wilderness until they reached the promised land. And remember Sir Edmund Hillary, who had that ultimate mountaintop experience on the summit of Mount Everest? From the moment he came back down, he devoted the rest of his life to tirelessly working to improve the lives of the Sherpas who lived at the bottom of the mountain. This is his little-told story, his little-told Act 2 of his mountaintop experience. Now, all of us know, oh, he's the guy that in 1950 whatever, made it to the top of Mount Everest. He was the first one. But what most of us have never heard is that he spent decades after that working to help the poorest of the poor in a very remote corner of Nepal. He helped them build hospitals and schools and airstrips and bridges, all things that they desperately needed. And he worked on reforestation projects to help the environment there. His friend, the same one I quoted before, described all this. For Ed, the fame he got from the climb up Everest became merely just a vehicle to raise money to accomplish his goal of helping the Sherpas. His legacy as a humanitarian, his friend said, should reach far beyond his legacy as a mountaineer. I think God picked the right guy to stand first so close to heaven. I think our legacies as humanitarians should reach far beyond our legacies as mountaineers too. Like Moses, Jesus, Martin, and Edmonds, every authentic mountaintop experience ends with the climber descending back down to earth, transformed and empowered to transform the whole world through service to those in need. These gifts that we receive on a mountaintop, the gifts of perspective and comfort and inspiration, come to us today at just the right moment. It's the last Sunday before Lent. Just 3 days from now, we will gather in this space on Ash Wednesday, and we will be told we are dust, and to dust we shall return, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And then for the next 40 days, we will walk together through the wilderness of Lent, headed with Jesus toward Jerusalem, toward the solemn heartbreak of Holy Week that culminates with his crucifixion. So what better time than now for us to have Transfiguration Sunday? What better time to be taken to the mountaintop, if even for a few minutes, to encounter God? Because we're going to need those gifts we received as we set out on our Lenten journey. Just before Lent begins for each of us, we are reminded of God's glory and power that will overcome death and the grave. And this affirmation lightens the shadows of the weeks ahead of us until the Easter sunrise dawns. I think we need these gifts from the mountaintop not just for Lent, but for our whole life's journey, because our time on the mountaintop should transform our walk through the valley. And I think that's the point of the story after all. I mean, it's an odd story, and trust me, biblical scholars have gotten all caught up in speculating about how supernatural it is. I honestly have read articles of people who spend pages arguing about weather patterns on a certain mountain and how a solar eclipse probably just made it look like he was glowing. But they're missing the far more important point. The way in which each of us and all of us are transfigured and transformed by our own mountaintop experiences with God, and what that means for the way we will live our lives when we climb back down. We can't live up there all the time, but we can spend enough time up there to get perspective, comfort, and inspiration, and we're going to need it because following Jesus not only means following him up to the mountain, it means following him down into the valleys where people are in deepest need. And we are called to follow him there. You know, there will always be plenty of people lined up, eager to get to the mountaintop. I found it really kind of supernatural, talk about supernatural, that this morning after I read my sermon one last time and made a few corrections and hit the print button, I turned the TV on, needing to watch the news. And I don't even remember what I was watching last night, but whatever it was on a channel that this morning was about the Sherpas climbing Mount Everest. Sat there for a minute, like, okay, I get it. But one of the points of that program was that these days, and I'm sure you've read about it, there literally are people lined up to climb up Mount Everest anytime there's a break in the weather. It's a huge industry now to get people up that mountain. But there are far fewer people who line up to go down into the valleys where people stand in need. And if the followers of Jesus won't go there, I ask you, who will? Because the one whom we follow is the one who stood in the swirling clouds on a mountaintop, blazing with glory, rubbing elbows with none other than Moses and Elijah, but who chose not to escape to heaven that day. He chose instead to climb back down to earth, complete his journey to Jerusalem, and exchange that robe of heavenly brightness for a crown of thorns. How can we not follow him?